Greetings, everyone. We're moving on to Chapter 4. This is going to be a little bit longer lecture, and it's going to be off the top of my head. There's several things I want to talk to you about. We are well on our way in this class, and I want you to think long and hard about how you're working in the discussion board. Let's see if we can't ramp it up a little bit. That's the major portion of this class. I want you to talk about education in a deep, thoughtful, educated, referenced manner. It's not just good enough to say, I think, or my opinion is, or I agree. Let's go deeper. Let's talk about it. Let's develop a discourse. And that discourse means debating and discussing and sometimes arguing in a nice, respectful way about what education is all about. In order for you to be an agent of change, and yes, education is always about change, you have to be able to develop your discourse. And I don't see that quite happening yet. I'm confident that you can get there. I think you guys are some great students, and I'm really excited about the makeup of this class. But I really do want you to go a little bit deeper on the discussion board, okay? So Chapter 4, let's talk about that a little bit. Chapter 4 is about the learner. It talks about the different types of learners you're going to have, and it profiles the learners of today's students. In your chapter, I have provided you with a slideshow, and I want to give you a little bit of context about where that slideshow came from. As you all know, I'm working on my PhD, and I have in my cohort and the PhD classes that I'm working on, there's quite a few elementary ed and early childhood education teachers in that cohort. And they're very experienced. Now, one of the things that they asked me to do when I got ready to teach this class was, I looked for their advice and I told them, and one of the things they wanted you to know as future educators is that education can be a very frustrating occupation. It can be a very rewarding occupation. Elementary and early childhood ed, even secondary ed, and yes, sometimes even college ed is difficult. But the main portion of K through 12 teaching is demanding. You're going to be dealing with students and situations that you never dreamt possible. And they wanted me to do everything I could to give you a realistic picture of what your students and learners are like. Some of the issues that you're going to deal with. One of them gave me a story about being a 4th grade teacher, and she had a young girl in her class, and day after day this young girl masturbated in class. And that's a pretty graphic description, and I hate to bring that up, but her home life was so bad, and this girl was in such a bad situation, that after the consultation with the family, the school, the principal, everybody, bringing everybody in, the school decided that it was better to keep her in class every day. They sat her at the back of the class and tried to keep it to a situation where they managed it. And when I heard this story, I thought to myself, what would you do, Paula? What would you do day after day if you had to deal with this? And your other students in your classroom are going to be exposed to this. And so that's just one scenario. I have another person in education who wanted me to tell you that last year, one of her students pushed her, assaulted her, and 4th grader. And the 4th grader was charged with a felony. Well, no, I don't know if it was a felony. That may be a lie, but it was the 4th grader was charged, and will never be able to go into the military because that's going to go on his record. And how are you prepared to deal with those? How do you feel about dealing with those kind of situations? What about a student who is a radical? What about a student who is cutting themselves? they have mutilation syndrome, or there's just so much going on out there. And they wanted me to see if I could paint you a picture of some of the frustrations and shocking situations that they deal with on a daily basis. And I'm not trying to scare you out of education, but I'm also trying to give you a realistic picture. And the more you know before you decide to become an educator, and the more you know before you walk into that classroom, the better prepared you're going to be. Um, I had a few situations that I dealt with when I was doing my student teaching, but nothing major. And I personally can't say that I had anything that I didn't that I dealt with that was tested my ethics. I had a situation where I felt like some of the educators there were unethical, and that began on the first day of class. They started talking about their student body instead of giving me an opportunity to develop my own thoughts and relationships with their student body. They started tainting my thoughts about that student body, and I thought that that was unethical. But that's not what Chapter 4 is about. Chapter 4 is about the varied learner, the profiles of today's learners. And I really want you to think long and hard about what those learners look like. Look at that slideshow and think about how you would handle a situation with those different types of learners that are in that slideshow. A friend of mine went to the Head Start program here in Carlsbad a few weeks ago, looking for a job, and they asked her if she could change diapers of 5 and 6 year olds who are still in their system, and she decided not to take the assistant's job, and I don't know if I could do it either. So, as a teacher, you may be faced with some of those kind of situations, and so let's just be realistic about what it is that educators have to do today. And anybody that goes into K through 12 teaching is a hero of mine. I haven't made it there yet. I don't know if I will. I wound up in higher ed unintentionally. I started out wanting to teach elementary school in Loving, New Mexico, and wound up teaching in higher ed and working in higher ed, and I don't know how long I'll stay here, but for now, I'm here until I get my PhD, and we'll see what the college decides to do with me. But believe me, college instructors face their own varied learner, and the profiles of the learners at the college level are just as varied as they are in K through 12. The only difference is we have a little bit more leeway with what we do with those learners, and so it's a little less rigid than what the K through 12 educator has to deal with. So anyway, that's my lecture for today. With today's society, think about your violence, the violence that goes on in schools today. And like I said, a friend of mine was assaulted by one of her students, and the student was not only kicked out of school, but was charged with assault, and will not ever be able to go into the military because of that. That's going to go on his record. I said that earlier. One of the things that she said about that I thought was interesting was when she made the report, she did not know that student was going to have the repercussions for that student were going to follow him throughout his life. And she told me, she said, had I known that, I probably wouldn't have charged him. So the point of that is we have to know our school laws. We need to know our societal laws that go along with what we're dealing with in education. And so I didn't know it either. I didn't know that if a student is charged even at that young age, that they will. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up for the night. I got choked up, so I had to stop for a minute. Listen, I'm going to try to have your grading done by the end of next week, or by the end of this weekend, and then by the end of next week, I'm going to have your assignments for the interviews and your assignments for the group project at the end of the semester. So I hope you guys have a good evening. I'm headed home for the night. Enjoy Chapter 4. Let me know if there's anything I can do for you. You guys are awful quiet out there. let me know if you're having problems. I can help you out. Adios and good night.